All right, so now that we kind of know the structure of the class, let's talk about sort of the tools, the equipment, the workspace, the kind of those fundamental things that it'll take to be successful with this. And I totally understand that one of the challenges is some of you are going to have like an amazing workshop and all these amazing tools, right? And for some of you, maybe this is like your first foray into like making something with your own hands. So that's really not that big of a deal. I actually tend to be one, to not have an amazing, huge workshop. I don't really obsess over the tools. My approach to making stuff is sort of an engineer's mind frame, which is, what is the simplest, most minimal cost-effective way to finish a build quickly and effectively. And if I don't need a bunch of fancy tools, I won't use them. I use my hacksaw all of the time. And so I do kind of have a core set of materials and tools that I do use, and we'll cover that in this video. But my number one advice is just like, use whatever you already have for this class. And remember, we have 30 days, so this is less about creating 3 builds that are like your magnum opus, right? Where it's like, I made these, I'm done, I never have to build anything again. This is about just like training your brain in the way you think and learning some fundamental skills so then you could take those skills and then go make something amazing over the next 6 months. And for a lifetime, you will have these skills to just make cool stuff from here on out, or improve the skills you already have, right? Think of this class sort of like, when you first took music class in 4th grade and they give you that cheap little plastic recorder. Like, it's not the most expensive piece of equipment, but it's more about just like teaching you the fundamentals of music. And it can actually still sound really good, even though it's made out of a bunch of cheap plastic. I know Casey Neistat hits on this a lot when people are like, I want to make films too, tell me all the equipment I need. What kind of nice cameras do I need? And he's like, ugh. And I totally agree with him. Like, you could make amazing videos just on an iPhone at this point. Like, incredible videos. It's way more about the story and the ideas and the thought behind it, and it's not all about the equipment. So don't get stressed out if you don't have an amazing workshop. You do not need it for this class, and you don't really need it in real life to make cool stuff. My first ever viral video, if you recall, was just an iPad in front, an iPad in back, a little bit of red paint, and an old sweatshirt I had. And I got like 4 million views on that in a couple days. So while there are some fundamental skills to be learned, it's much more about like a way of thinking, and that's what this class is all about, and I'm stoked to kind of talk about that with you guys. Having said that, there are a few essential things you will need for this class. The first is an Arduino kit. And maybe you've heard this before, you're not really sure what it is. It's basically just a mini little computer, and it's incredibly empowering to have this as an arrow in your quiver. And it might seem scary, but it's really not that bad. So, using this, you do simple things. You see it comes with a book. It's got the actual board here. Then here's like a breadboard. But you could have a light beam sensor so that when your sister walks in the room and it breaks that beam, then it goes through this and then it outputs to an alarm and alerts you someone's come in the room, right? Or maybe you have a box that's locked, and only with a secret knock does it open, so you get the contents inside. Or maybe you got a plant, and you've got a little moisture sensor in there. And when the moisture gets below a certain level, then you want to release a little valve that pours water into the plant. Being able to program with an Arduino, and it really is not that bad, and there's tons of examples of really clever projects online. It's just a great arrow to have in your quiver as a maker. I use something like this in a ton of my builds. So in this class, we won't use that on project number 1, but for projects 2 and 3, if you so choose, you could sort of integrate this into a design. So what you're gonna wanna do is go onto Amazon and just search for Arduino starter kit. And you'll see the first one that comes up is for like 35 bucks. It's actually not the official Arduino brand, but it's kind of like open source. And this is like an officially supported knockoff brand. So this one is totally great. It comes with a bunch of sensors, wires, a breadboard. If you want the official one, which I've got here, it's like 85 bucks. It comes with like a book, but you really don't need that. So if you don't have one already, go ahead and order that now. All right, let's talk about base materials, right? It takes stuff to make stuff. And one that I use a lot, it's just a common material, is wood. It's readily available. You get it in different sizes, right? Little dowels, big dowels. You can buy these at Home Depot just in like increments like this, and it's good just, you can just whip something together with just these. If it's bigger, 2x4s, and then you have plywood, so big sheets of wood. I like it because it's generally forgiving. You can use screws, so you could take things apart, put it back together again. In that family of wood are popsicle sticks. If you're doing something a little smaller and desktop-y, popsicle sticks and hot glue are a fantastic combination. I will probably use this at some point in this class. Another material I really like to use is like PVC pipes, because there's tons of options in the hardware store. It's relatively cheap, lots of fittings, so you can make something pretty big that can be pretty structurally sound as well. Super easy to cut. I'm a big fan. Next type of general material I would say is like 3D printing, right? No secret, I'm a big fan here. This is the exterior of the glitter bomb. You can just imagine it would be really hard to make this with anything other than 3D printed, and we just needed this really specific shape for what our purposes were. When I was at both NASA and Apple, we would design in CAD all the time, and then from that you can 3D print something or get it machined. And that's the beauty of this, is you design it, you almost prototype on the computer in CAD, you try a bunch of options. Once you have the one you know that looks good, all the components work, you press a button, and then when you wake up in the morning, a thing exists. So we're not going to be doing this for project 1 or even 2 in this class, but I will discuss this for project 3. Another option is cardboard. So everyone has some experience with this, when the refrigerator got delivered, or even now with like all the Amazon boxes, right? It's obviously not as sturdy, but really great, easy to cut, easy to work with. Along those lines of like, you got foam or styrofoam, a little bit compliant. Sometimes though that's good in design. This is like a built-in spring or even damper that can sometimes be nice. And then there's like metal, right? And in general, I feel like metal is a bit of like an advanced material. I don't use it that much. For the Ninja Warrior obstacle course, we did have like metal poles to kind of extend the whole course 6 feet into the air. The course itself was generally made of wood. Sheet metal can be cool. It's really nice if you need something really strong and structural to use metal, because then you could actually like weld it together. I'm not even that good at welding. Usually I just have a buddy do that for me. There is this too. It's called 80-20. We use this all the time at NASA. It's really adjustable. It's basically like extruded aluminum. This can be really great if you need something really strong and precise. It's just amazingly adjustable. The downside is it's kind of expensive. All right, so those are kind of like the base materials you might use in a build. Next are some like electrical or mechanical components. So by that I mean something like springs, right? It's great to have a bunch of these little springs of various sizes laying around. On that same note, rubber bands. In this same category, I would consider like little hobby motors like this. Here's a little bit bigger one, the gearbox on it. Eventually you can use really big motors. This is like one for the automatic bullseye dartboard. We had to move that board around really quickly, so we had like 6 of those. Little Arduino for the automatic strike bowling ball. So when I leaned left and right, it could send that signal to the bowling ball and it could go left and right. Also in this category, you have things like pulleys to redirect force or even to reduce force using mechanical advantage. Or even if you want to get simple, an eye hook can sometimes act as a pulley. In the same category, and by the way, don't freak out, you don't have to memorize all this. I'm just trying to expose you to types of things that would be in this category. A pneumatic piston, which we'll talk about later in the course, but here's a good example where you see a combination of a lot of these things. This was, of course, the home wrecker portion of the Squirrel Ninja obstacle course. You've got here a pneumatic piston, which allows the platform to drop away, but you're also seeing wood here, right? There's a sensor under here that senses the weight of the squirrel. So it's kind of a combination of a lot of these things. A metal pole attached to this which went to the ground that held it up in the air. Common type of fasteners are screws. I really like just drywall screws. or nails, but in general I like screws better because you could take something apart and put it back together and easier than nails. You've got different types of glue, so like super glue, epoxy, and hot glue. I generally like hot glue out of all these. If it's totally permanent, then I'll use epoxy. It's stronger than super glue, and it's also better when you need like a large amount. But super glue can be useful when you just need a little bit of dab of something that needs to be strong. Hot glue is great for like prototyping. I'm sure I'll use this at some point in this course. You also got just tape. So like, electrical tape, there's duct tape. Downside of duct tape is it can leave a residue. Gaffer's tape is fantastic. If you have never used this before, you should get some. It doesn't leave a residue, it tears really easily. This is used really commonly in the film industry, but I use it a lot in builds too, especially in the prototype phase. All right, so those are kind of fasteners and how you secure stuff together. The next category, I guess, is how you manipulate those materials and get them to the right size. This is a hacksaw, it's fantastic. This is probably an essential. I use this a ton because it can just cut through lots of different materials. If you want to cut through something larger, like a big piece of wood quicker, you got something like a skill saw. Another probably must-have is just a cordless power drill, and then just like a bunch of various bits, that's super useful whether you're working with PVC or metal or plastic or wood. Then some kind of like utility blade or something to cut, and a tape measure. So I know that was sort of just a crash course and I just barfed out a lot of stuff, right? But I intentionally don't want you to like think, oh, I need to go buy out all these things. I'm just trying to give you a sense of the landscape, right? Of what it might look like, the types of tools and materials I use as a maker. As a great example of this, let me show you a build that sort of encapsulates a lot of what I just talked about. In the world's largest Nerf gun, right? This is great because you can see the main material used here is just wood. But in addition to that, we've got PVC pipe going through here. You've got various, valves and gauges. We've got tubing. You can see the handle here is 3D printed. You've got foam. This spins around. Again, wood, PVC pipe. If I pull this out, going with the theme of using crud you got lying around your house, the suction bit on this oversized dart is a toilet plunger. This is a pool noodle. The end here is a 3D printed cap. And it's fastened together with screws and wood glue. And this is obviously a big build and it's out of the scope of this class. But hopefully you can see it's like, a lot of the things I just talked about there kind of can all come together beautifully to make something really awesome that gets you in the Guinness World Records. All right, well, where do you get all this stuff? A couple good options, Amazon.com is great. They've got fast shipping. Really, you're able to compare really easily. There's reviews. Also, a website I use a lot is McMasterCar.com, which is fantastic because they've got pictures of everything, especially for like the mechanical and electrical components we talked about. In addition, they'll have like the specs. They'll have CAD for you to download. It's really organized. They also ship fast. But sometimes even waiting a day to get something to arrive is too long. So I would really recommend you find your local hardware store. Make that like an extension of your workshop, right? I know my local Ace Hardware, Home Depot, and Lowe's front and back. Sometimes it's great just to get in there and feel something with your hands and kind of really understand the size and scope and heft of it, or even to get inspiration. I remember for the Ninja Warrior obstacle course, I needed just a little cushion for the weight sensor, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted, so I just walked the halls and eventually found some random like window insulation that was just the right stiffness, and it worked perfectly. They also generally have really great return policies, so that can be handy. If you just buy something and then you end up just taking it back if you don't use it. Along those lines of getting inspiration, the thrift store can be great, especially if you want to, inject a little bit of creativity and heart into your build. They got a lot of crazy stuff there for pretty cheap, and sometimes it's not until you walk down the aisles that you see exactly what you wanted. As for like 3D printing, don't worry if you don't have a 3D printer, because Even if you design something in that, there's services where you can send them the file and then they'll ship it right back to you with a pretty quick turnaround time. But once again, most points are awarded to sort of using what you've got. When I would go on Jimmy Kimmel and we talk about like pranks, I'd always make a point of saying like, all of these prank ideas are just made with junk you got lying around your house. As much as possible in my builds, I try and create them with just normal everyday things, right? It just has so much better of a story and it feels more accessible to people when they can see that. It's way more relatable than some super fancy, exotic, build that you just had to ship off and it was really expensive. So the very last thing we'll talk about is your workspace. Ideally, you just want a spot that for the next month can be yours and it doesn't interrupt your daily life. So you can go and return to it when you want to return to it. So, a corner of your garage, in other words, is better than using the kitchen table, which you'd have to like take it down and put it back up. I know that won't be an option for everyone. So even if you are like in a small apartment or something, that still works. Just get some like Tupperware bins or something and you could pack your stuff up, and then when you want to work again, you spend the first 10 minutes just laying everything out again. But regardless of where you do it, you want to stay organized. Keep your own little area, nice and organized. Sometimes I get accused that, when I'm at my house, when I have my workbench, that it's like a set because it looks so clean behind me. But that's really just because it helps me think when things are nice and organized and I know where things are. I work faster, more efficiently, and I'm just more creative when I don't have that like cluttering up my brain. All right, so I know this could probably feel a little bit overwhelming, kind of like trying to take a drink from a fire hydrant. But again, the purpose was just to sort of expose you to the landscape and not being like, go out and buy all this stuff. The only thing you need to buy right now is that Arduino kit. There'll be plenty of time in the class once you decide what your build is and therefore what materials you need. Whatever you don't already have around your house, you can go out and get, you can order it. That's built into the schedule. So don't freak out and feel like you have to go out and buy all of this stuff. But yeah, hopefully this gets you excited about what we're gonna do together for the next month. If you're totally new to this, then you're gonna learn these basic skills and ways of thinking that are gonna enable you to make and create stuff for the rest of your life. And if you've already been doing this for a while, well then this class is all about leveling up the skills you do have, and especially thinking more about how you communicate these ideas in a story-driven manner that make other people just as stoked about the stuff you're making as you are. So, I'll see you guys in the next one.